So yeah, my name is Sean Coleman. I have my bird with me. If you ever see me grabbing it, something off screen, or if you see the camera move, it's because he's biting it. Um, yeah. So my name is Sean. I've been in games industry for 12 years now. About 12 years. I graduated about 13 years ago from a small college in Tucson, Arizona. My first job, so it was like, I think it was, yeah, it's almost to the day. It was December 1st of 2008 was like my first day at Insomniac Games. And then I was there for about 4 years. And while I was there, I did cinematics and in-game work. And I did, what did we work on? We worked on Ratchet and Clank, 2 Ratchet and Clank games. Resistance 3. So I did pre-production, about a little less than a year of pre-production on Sunset Overdrive, and Fuse. The game we don't talk about. The game, everybody's always like, Fuse, what's that? Like, yep, exactly. I only helped on that for about 4 or 5 months.
Gotcha.
And then I went over to Riot Games after about 4 years at Insomniac. Actually quit Insomniac, but I didn't have anything lined up, and I spent a few months. I had saved up a little money, and I spent a few months just making my own stuff and making games and stuff like that. And then I went to Riot. I was on the Champ rework team. So we redid, if anybody plays the game, we redid Garen. I think the stuff I worked on was Master Yi, Garen, Sivir, Nasus, and Twitch, where I did 5 champions. And then after a little under a year, then I wanted to go do some other stuff. So I showed some of my artwork to my leads to see if there was somewhere at Riot where I could go, where there are other projects. Because at the time there was just League of Legends. This was 7 or 8 years ago. There was just League of Legends. And there were some other projects, but at the time Riot was really secretive, even internally, about what was being made. And they was just trying to be cautious.
For sure.
So I didn't know. So I showed all the stuff I had made while I was out of work. And I was like, is there anywhere I can go do this? And they were like, yeah, actually, there's a couple projects. So then I went to, basically, I do all my work in Unity at home. And so they were like, oh, there's a game being made in Unity, which turns out to be Legends of Runeterra, which is the card game that's out. And so I went over there for 4 years, where I did, I mean, honestly, I have a reel I'll show you that's just like a little bit of all the stuff I did. We did everything. I mean, I modeled, textured, rigged, animated, scripted, everything. So it wasn't so much an animation position as it was like art position. And while I was there, I ended up becoming I was an animator, and then I ended up being an art lead and an assistant art director. And after 4 years, we weren't close to shipping yet, and I was like, that's all I got in me. I got to go back to production. I got to make something that people see. So I went to another project that was still in pre-production. I went there for 2 years. So half my career has been spent in R&D, which there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons to talk about there. And then that project went through some, like, they wanted to kind of tweak how they were working on stuff. So and at the same time, Riot was gearing up to release 5 games or 4, whatever it was that we released this year.
Right.
Which is just, I mean, I've never even heard of something like that, a studio releasing that many games in 1 year. And so they kind of were like, hey, if there's anybody who can come and go to these other projects and help. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go. And they were like, how about you go back to that project you were on? And I was like, well, that's not my first choice, but okay. And I've been on it for about a year, and it ended up being probably the best year in my, like, the most fun I've ever had in my career. And the next year looks like it's going to be even better, like, because of the cool stuff we're getting to do, which we can talk about a little bit. But
that's awesome.
So that's it in a nutshell. Yeah.
It's awesome. All right. I guess we could pull up your reel then. Let me see if I have it actually. And we can kind of talk about.
Sure. Yeah, I can either, if you have it up or I have it. You
Let's
hear
see.
that? Somebody says, "I hear that bird in class. It's cool to see." Yeah, I hear all
Yeah, I think that's Kenny. I think Kenny is in Kim's class.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is him.
Yeah, I was wondering why you had a like everything was so bird related for you.
Yeah, I know. When I was cutting that new reel, I was like, wow, I have a lot of bird stuff, and I have more bird stuff that I didn't even put on the reel. Like,
I see, and it's funny like when you like join our Discord channel and stuff. Like I
so
think it was like a bird icon and stuff, and I'm
yeah.
like, at first I'm like, dude, is this someone like random who just came in here? And I'm like, I was just like questioning. I'm like, man, should I kick this person out or is this Sean?
Right. What's funny is the level up, which I'm excited to talk about these. The level up, which are these little, essentially 5-second cinematics for
Yeah.
the game. The one I'm working on right now, I was doing the previs for it, and the layout, the previs, whatever. And I showed my art director because we work really closely on it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is great. This is great." He's like, "But in the background, you have these birds flying, and I don't know if we really need them here." And I was like, "No, I gotta have the birds. There's really no reason for it, but I gotta have birds in there."
I said, please just give me this one.
Yeah, that's what I said. I was like, "Can I just put birds in there?"
That's awesome. Let's see. So here we go. Let me see here.
Azir main, huh? All right.
Let's see.
I was at Riot while they were making Azir. It was really cool. That was right about when I started. And Skylar, who's another animator. Sorry, I'm responding to chat.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Who's another animator. He was working on it, and he's tremendously talented. And we ended up working together on another project later. But yeah, it was really cool to see them like working on that champion. It was so cool.
Oh, let's see.
Do you want to? Tell you what. Do you have that on life size, or if not, on
No, it's on my desktop. So
Here, I'll send you a link because then we can scrub through it.
Oh, okay. Is it on your sync sketch?
Yeah.
All right.
That'd be better.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay. Here, I'll share it.
Okay. Put this to the side. Okay.
I'm so used to using Slack, so I gotta remember how to use.
I know. It's we also had to switch over from Slack to Discord. Let's see. Let's see. Oh wait, you need to make it public.
Oh, how do I do that?
Yeah, that's like one.
There we go. I see it. There's a lock there, maybe. This review is locked. Okay.
Okay.
Hold on. No, it's still not.
It's okay. This is all us just figuring things out.
Yeah, right. Hey, if anybody in chat knows how to make something public, tell me. Yeah, Skylar Sir. Yeah, you got it. Does anybody know how to make it public? Make a video public?
I think there's like under share.
Share settings, maybe.
Yeah.
External collaborators.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Let me just make this cleaner. Okay, cool.
There you go. Try that second link there.
Okay. Cool. All right. Let me see here. Okay, cool. Join live meeting. All right. Cool.
Why do I sound like an Azir main? That's funny. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Okay. Yeah. So go for it. You can either just play it or scrub it, whatever you want.
Pop it over here. Oh, bird person. There you go. Yeah, you're right. I played a lot of Misfortune. Which she's a pirate, so she's a bird person probably.
Cool. Let me lower that. All right. Cool.
So yeah, I'll just kind of walk through the reel and talk about it. And you guys can ask if there's something you see that you want to ask. Ooh, look at that first frame. Nobody ever sees that though. Cut off there on the left. What's the hotkey? Okay, right and left.
Yeah.
Too easy. This was. I wouldn't call this like I was just telling Sean before we hopped on that this is definitely not like what I would call an amazingly cut demo reel. I like to cut my demo reels, like I really spend time like getting beats of the song to like cut really well against the stuff, and So this is definitely not. Don't use this demo reel as an example of like a really well edited demo reel. This is more just like, oh, here's some work to talk about. So this stuff, the stuff at the very beginning, this was stuff I just did at the beginning of the year on Legends of Runeterra, which is our digital card game, which is really cool. You guys should go check it out. And this was I work on the realization part of the project, which is we do all the level ups. So whenever you play a champion card, if you meet the requirements of that champion, like kill 3 enemies or whatever, the champion levels up, so they get stronger. But we do this really cool moment where we cut away to like a little mini movie. And if you go look at the game, it's kind of like set 1, set 2. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent.
Oh, go ahead.
Set 1, set 2, which are the sets that the game released with, were kind of smaller scale things, which I wasn't there when they built them. That was like during the time that I was gone. They did a great job, but it was like smaller things because the tech was new and they were figuring out how to do stuff, but it was still really cool. So it'd be like a sword would come in and land on the board, or a sword would swipe, and set 2, they got a little more ambitious. I think they did a full character. Misfortune, you go down into like her ship, right? I mean, these are 5-second little cuts to like these cool little moments. And you go down into her ship, and she's like a ghosted version. She shoots. And then I joined right at the end of set 2, and the storyboard artist who was on the team at the time, he's moved to a different team since then, but he had a couple of cool ideas for how to do Shyvana, which is the dragon that's on the reel, which we'll get to. Honestly, let's just go to it. We'll skip around because I'm just going down this road. So
yeah, go ahead.
So I'll kind of just let this play a little bit. He had this really cool idea, and he had it done in, he had it all drawn, but they didn't have, the animation they had done up to that point was kind of simpler stuff. They didn't have anybody who had the time, let's put it that way. Our art director actually did a lot of the animation in the game. He's a good animator, but he's the art director. He doesn't have a lot of time to spend doing these things. Right. So as these ideas got more ambitious, it was kind of like, oh, we don't have anybody. And so it was lucky that I came back to the team, and I was like, oh, these are really cool ideas. Let's do it. So that's Shyvana was kind of the first real like, let's do the full champion. Let's show them in all their glory. Let's not do a part of it. Let's do the whole champion. It'll be so cool. And let's do it in 5 seconds tops, Gotcha. And we were really happy with how it came out. This isn't the final version. This doesn't have the effects and everything on it. This is just like, this was my render out of Maya with my background. Like, I grabbed backgrounds from our game and
gotcha.
That, but because to be honest, he did some really cool flame effects when the dragon breathes the fire, because it breathes fire into the camera, but it covered up all the animation. And I was like, well, for a demo reel, I wanted to see the animation, so I put.
Oh, I see.
Anyways, long story short, that's what I spend most of my time working on are these. And we've so set 3 pushed it more towards more of a character. More of a character focused thing rather than like, oh, it's Garen's sword. It's like, no, you see Garen now, right? So it's been really cool because we can now just make these little mini movies, and we actually have a lot of technical constraints that we have in the next set. We have been finding ways to get rid of those constraints, so it's really cool. So I'm just gonna let a few of them play while I talk.
Sure.
So that's what I spend most of my time doing. But at the beginning of the year, after a few months of being on the team, we wanted to just do a little animation. I wanted to do an animator swap because we had another animator who had only ever worked on the pets. And so I was like, well, I want to make sure that everybody's at least has an idea of how to do everything. Because some people get sick or whatever.
Sure.
So we did a swap for like about a month where I went over and worked on the pets. And that's what's at the beginning of the reel are the pets.
Gotcha.
Sorry, I think they're called Guardians.
Okay.
And he did a couple of level ups, which he did a great job on. So that's what's at the beginning of the reel. So these are little cute guys and gals that live at the bottom left of the screen, and you can click on them. I think somebody asked that in the questions. Can you pet them? And yes, you can. You can click to like tap, and then you can drag, and it's like you're petting them.
That's awesome.
So it's really cute, and there's all kinds of ones. So this was the Spirit Fox that I worked on, alongside another animator, Jessica Yu. She's tremendously talented.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so that's that. These are interesting because you can't really tell, but they're super cheated. The perspective is, especially when you see it on the board, because which I didn't render it with the board, but the board is kind of forced perspective.
Oh, interesting.
So you have to force the perspective of these, so it makes them very hard. Like if you saw him from a different angle, it's completely goofy looking, which can make it hard. And in game, we have this is where games and film are different. Is the technical limitations. This is the most frustrating part about games. It's the most fun part and the most frustrating if you like problem solving.
Sure.
So in our game, your cards, right, have to sit at a certain height, right? So your board is, sorry, am I even in camera? The board is here. Your cards sit, I don't know, here, so many units off the board.
Gotcha.
Somewhere in between there is where we let guardians work, and then we have to keep space above that for anything that might, like UI.
Interesting.
Right? So you have a very small amount of space you can work within. So when you see these guardians come up to camera, they pretty much never come up to camera. We actually just have to like scale and then make it look like it goes back down. So
gotcha.
a lot of stuff. I didn't do too much of this. Like I kept pretty distant, but you'll see some of them where they'll come right up to camera, but we're not actually doing any of that.
Interesting.
So these are the level ups. This was a fun one. How do we do a scroll that unrolls? We also have joint limitations. We can only have so many joints.
Sure.
You know, we can, for the way we used to work, we could only have 10,000 polygons on screen at any given second.
Oh, interesting.
So that was another reason why they previously didn't do full characters, because even a low poly character is 10,000, you know?
Yeah.
We are finding some clever ways to get around these things.
Sure.
That, I don't know if I can go into or not, but
gotcha.
So the next set is going to be so awesome. So if anybody plays, oh my gosh, the next set is going to be so cool.
It's awesome. You said this is all done through Unity, you said? Most of the part?
Yeah, I mean all the gameplay is done in Unity. So obviously we animate in Maya. You know, we use all the same tools that anybody does. Maya for animation and ZBrush and all that stuff. And then, then everything is exported as FBX to Unity, where it all gets assembled.
Gotcha.
And what's cool is whenever the session starts and I do a class, I do a lot of this stuff at home. So I have my own personal projects in Unity, so we can look at how we actually do these things. Like we can open up Unity and I'll show you like this is how characters get hooked up, and this is how, you know, it'll be a diet version because I'm not a programmer, you know.
Right.
But at least you'll get an idea of like, and here's how you set up a file like for runs. So here we'll skip over here, for example. So I have some. So like the owl, for example, is a great. I put this owl up here because it's a perfect example, like very, almost like tier 1 level stuff that you'll, no matter what game you work on, you'll do stuff like this.
Interesting.
Which is okay. We got to run, cool. But then when you see it in game, it's you can see him leaning left and right as I turn. Oh, you animate. You take the same run, and on a layer in Maya, you put a lean, and then you animate a right lean, and then in game you do some code that blends between them. Right. And then things like this right here. I did an animation for when you hit a hard 180 on the on the stick, it senses it and it plays this animation.
It's awesome.
And then I think I have like a stop animation in there too, which is something League characters do this when you stop putting input, you do like just a little slide stop, you know.
Gotcha.
So it's cool as we can look at all that stuff in Maya and Unity.
Is that so? Did you model that yourself and rigged it as well?
Yeah. So all my personal. That's why I separated this into 2 categories. Animation. a lot of it's professional. So mostly I did the previs,
Mm-hmm.
so like the layout and the animation.
Mm-hmm.
Here and there, I actually do other things, but
Mm-hmm.
but usually that's my contribution. Then when you get to personal stuff, it's all me. It's
That's
all
awesome.
models, rigs, textures, animations,
That's awesome.
everything. The only exception to that would be under animation, the owl and the wolf here. These are everything you see here is me, except for the effects. That
Huh.
was I work with I worked with a guy. He's down in Australia. His name's Adam Phillips.
Hmm.
He does Brackenwood stuff.
Oh,
It's
I
old,
see.
yeah, old web stuff, like super
Oh, yeah.
popular web stuff from like 15 years ago, and he's
Yeah, yeah.
still doing it. He's so talented.
That's awesome.
So he did. I contacted him because we were working together professionally, and I was like, "Dude, would you would you mind?"
Dude,
So he
that's
was like, "Yeah,
awesome.
sure." It's so cool because it's funny because if you actually look, this is the very first shot, which I really like. So I put it on here because I love the feel coming out of that tunnel.
Oh, for sure.
But you'll notice this. Now, to be fair, this was like 7 years ago, so I could do this better now. But look at the ground. It's like not that. It's pretty crummy. And then on the second shot, he was like, "Do you mind if I redo the ground?" And I was like, "Sure." And it's like so much better looking. But I didn't have. He hadn't redone it for this shot yet, and I never got it from him because we couldn't finish the project. So.
Gotcha.
Uh,
I think
but yeah, everything else. Go
I,
ahead.
I think Chad actually from our class, he actually asked about basically kind of like how you guys got that type of look. Like
On the
it's
owl shots.
yeah, it feels very like 2D kind of like Flash
Yeah.
almost.
This is why I'm so excited. Uh, I love mentoring. I have mentors at work or mentees at work,
Mm-hmm.
and I have had mentors, so I have been the mentee. So I love this whole process. I think it's so fun to teach and
Awesome.
to learn. So I'm excited for this. And where I'm driving at is this kind of stuff we'll get to look at. Like I have all of these files. We'll open this stuff up. We can look at all this stuff.
Mm.
This is actually all 3D except for the effects.
Mm.
Everything you see here is 3D.
Interesting.
What this was again. This is 7 or 8 years old. There's way better ways of doing this stuff now, but 7 or 8 years ago there really weren't. So I wanted to make something that looked like 2D, and I wanted to make something that gave me the freedom of
Right.
2D. Because at the time I didn't really know how to rig very well.
Sure.
So I was like, well, how do I do things like? Let me see if I can find it. Like this is a great example. Like, how do I rig? How do I make a rig that can like, really
Mm-hmm.
bend that finger back and all that? And I was like, and do those smears. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. So I'll just do a style. I'll do a 2D style,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can paint whatever I want. So what I did is these are 3D rigs. It's just all flat colors. There's no shadows. There's nothing. It's just flat colors.
Right.
So really, I mean, I can go in and paint, really easily over top of these, and then I painted in shadows. I painted in rim lighting.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you see lighting, that's all painted in.
It's awesome.
And what's cool is it meant also like I didn't have to be amazing at my and they're all segmented models. It's like an arm is made of 2 pieces. It's because I'll just paint over.
Right.
You know. Now to be honest, nowadays there's ways to do this in a more clever way, and Blender even has like 2D built into
Yeah,
it. So
it's crazy.
like, yeah, but they didn't have that years ago, so this is the best I could do. So yeah, this was just like a short little 15-second thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah, all this stuff. I did this owl based on a concept. We had on one of my teams. I was working with a girl from Russia. She's an insanely talented concept artist, and her husband also works at Riot, and he was a concept artist. I don't know if they're there still or not. And I asked her if she wanted to work on something together, and she said yes. But then she was like, "But my husband probably would be more up your alley as far as like what you want to make," because I gave her this whole pitch. Like I sent her an email with all these ideas and stuff.
Sure.
And she was like, "Actually, my husband's really excited about this, so you should talk to him." And he did a couple really cool concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what this is. I used his concept, and I just did a quick model. Again, there's nothing crazy good about this model. It's pretty simple. I never got to texture it. I still haven't.
I see.
So yeah. So this is a fun one. I never finish any of my projects. I just get them up to a certain point, and then I'm done.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. It's the artist curse. That's how you know you're a real artist. 400 unfinished projects for every finished one.
Yep.
And then this same thing, I was like, oh, I have another idea, and also this is like I have probably 10,000 things that I haven't finished. I just put stuff up here that at least looked interesting.
Yeah.
So all these were like me trying to. There's stuff in Unity now where you don't even have to be a programmer, and you can just input your animations, and you'll have vaulting and running and jumping, and it sounds like it's amazing. They're not that easy. This was me
Interesting.
trying to learn them, and they're not that easy. You kind of still have to be a programmer, but you can at least get your runs in and your
Sure.
walk and stuff.
Gotcha.
And then this little bear guy, this is actually a finished game that I released. I made it was like my goal was I want to make everything in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want it to be a little it's 5 minutes. It's nothing more now. I want it to be like a little iPad game for like kids, basically.
Oh, I
Like,
see. I see.
that was the creative idea behind it. It was like, oh, it's so it's actually out. It's called The Lighthouse. It's on itch.io. So if anybody knows about itch.io, it's a place where people dump all kinds of free indie games.
Gotcha.
So you can go play it. It's a little point and click. It's cute. It's not hard.
Yeah.
4 minutes. This is one of the things I was making between jobs, just learning Unity. Just pixel art. This is just messing around. Again, this is me ripping off Hyper Light Drifter because it's one of my all-time favorite games.
Gotcha.
And then there's tons of stuff to show for that. This is another project I'm doing that there's tons I can show. It's all like half done, so it's like it's not great demo reel stuff. It's more like if anybody's in the class, I'll open stuff up and show you a bunch of stuff.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, that's cool. That's interesting. One question that came up to like in my mind is like, I know like there's so many technical aspects that you've gone into in terms of like making your own game and testing out Unity and stuff like that. And I was wondering like, do you feel like going into the game industry, like would you recommend or suggest students to like not just to like have just animation kind of brain, but also like diving into like what you did of like testing Unity and stuff like that? Do you think that puts you in a higher like I don't know like
yeah no, it's a good question. The short answer is yes. Like if you demonstrate an aesthetic ability, and then on top of that you demonstrate some level of technical, even if it's just technical interest, it doesn't even have to be that you're good at it. Like honestly, I mean, let's be honest, everything that is in this reel is mostly just a character running, right? Like if you really look at it, it's just like time and time again, it's just a character running, because that's about the most I can do on my own. It's a character click, I mean, that's the deepest I can go, even with my scripting. Anything more than that, you'd really have to learn how to program.
Right.
So, but even if all you know how to do is like, I mean, I got stuff in, I got stuff moving around, that's pretty awesome, man. And like, I can tell you, when I see that on reels, which I don't that often, but when I do, it turns heads for sure. Now, it doesn't replace, you still need to. Hey, Kimlet, he's getting agitated. You mind? That's okay. Yeah, he's done. We're not usually in here unless we're crunching. We're not usually going in the other room by now, so he's trying to tell me that it's time to leave. He's just gonna be. Yeah, you might just put him away for now.
So much attitude.
Oh my god, you have no idea. Yeah, you have no idea. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't replace like the artistic know-how. If you find yourself being really interested and really good at the tech side and not so much the animation side, you probably are a tech artist.
I see.
That's probably the path you're going down, which are insanely valuable.
Right.
But yes, if you can learn a little bit of that, it's great. But if it doesn't interest you, or that's okay too. Like a great demo reel is a great demo reel,
Right.
So I wouldn't sweat it.
Cool.
And you'll learn all those things on the job. So.
Gotcha. Cool. Some. Yes.
Would you go into game? Oh, okay. Would going into game implementation be part of the term as well, or going further into game side of it? Oh.
Right. It's kind of like what we talked about, right? A little bit.
I
Gotcha.
think he means like if they took the class, would
I
going
see.
into game. Um, I think, I mean, for anybody interested, I would happily show you what I know.
Hmm.
That's probably the best way to word it, because what I don't want to do is oversell it. Like I can teach you how to put things in Unity. I can show you the tools that I have used, but I can't teach you the tools that I've used because there's just a lot to learn. So to give you a high level view, what I use in Unity is Playmaker, which is a third. The way Unity works is they're like, we don't build much of. We have it's kind of like Maya, where we have like it's a great tool that you can do a bunch of stuff in. But what the genius thing is they said we have an asset store, a Unity asset store, where other people can make all the cool tools and stuff and sell them on our asset store.
Yeah.
And we'll take a little cut of that. And it's very robust. So Playmaker is a third-party tool that lets you script. It's called visual scripting, and which is the best way to think about it is like diet coding.
Interesting.
It's like coding, for juniors, for artists. But it's still really it's a lot of work, and in a lot of places it is a full-time job. So I'm not going to teach that, but I'm happy to show it to people. I'm happy to answer questions about it. I'm happy to show what I've done with it. And then there's also third-party things like you can go download. Again, like I said, there's whole systems that people have built that are like, with minimal coding, you can get a whole character running around and shooting and doing all this stuff.
Gotcha.
And the what minimal coding means to some people, to a coder, minimal coding is minimal coding. To an artist, minimal coding is a lot of coding. So probably it won't be that. Really, we probably won't get into game implementation. But I can show you some professional techniques of how to set your files up. I can steer you in the direction, but ultimately it'll be, if you are interested in that, it's a road you'll probably go down on your own.
Gotcha.
That I could offer guidance on. But that's it.
Cool.
So mostly the animation side.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right. Let's answer some questions from what we've had before. Let's see here. Cool. All right. So Kaylee asked, did you always know you wanted to be in the game industry as an animator, and which game was your favorite project to work on? So I feel like you kind of like touched base on that when the introduction, but if you wanted to kind of go over it one more time.
It was what got me in. Yeah, did I? No, I didn't know. I think a lot of people in games probably. When I started 12 years ago, the industry was, even though it had been around for a while, it was still kind of young. I think in the past 12 years, it's crazy how much the industry has boomed. During my time, it went from the movie industry was the most entertainment, made the most money, and it over the past 12 years, it's changed where games now make more money. So it's really blown up. And I think with that, what you get is a lot of people who have grown up seeing that industry as like a real opportunity. So I think nowadays there are a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I want to work in games. Like Jessica, the other animator that I work with, she's like, oh, Riot was always the place I wanted to work at. That was always my dream job. Whereas for me, when I was younger, if you had asked me like, would you want to work in games, I would have said like, I guess, I don't know. I mean, like, does Nintendo hire? That's about, you know what I mean? It just wasn't. Or Blizzard. Those were the two companies I knew.
Right.
I played lots of games, but it just never really like occurred to me that you could get a job in it. I know that sounds weird, but so I didn't know. I really didn't think about games as an option until I graduated, and then I wanted a job, and then they definitely were options.
Sure.
But no, I wanted to be in film. I wanted to go to Pixar or Disney, and unfortunately, because of the, same with my wife, we graduated during the Great Recession. It made it very hard. There were no jobs. There were no jobs. It was terrible. So it's not like it is now, where like on my LinkedIn, every day I get an email from LinkedIn. I just like to stay connected. Like, what jobs are out there, even though I'm not looking. I mean, I'm not kidding. There's a new animation job every other day. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Just in LA.
Yeah.
So it was not like that. I mean, not to sound like a, an old person, but it was like you would hear about a job. Oh my God, there's a job opening at Insomniac, and every animator would flood them.
Yeah.
So, um, so no, it wasn't. At the time, it wasn't. I wanted to be in film, and I went to Insomniac. I was really excited to go to Insomniac though because their games were very. I mean, back then especially, there was no other games making like essentially Disney movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like really heavily reliant on cartoony animation
Mm-hmm.
and stylized stuff. Um, so I was so excited. And on top of that, we get to do the cinematics. So it was like the same team that made the in-game animation also made the cinematics, which is not common.
Right.
Um, so that was a dream. So the first year I got to work on a Ratchet game, and it was like heaven. And then the second year they were like, okay, well now we're gonna do Resistance, which is like a hyper realistic shooter
Right.
where you're doing mocap. There's really not a lot of animation. We even had we bought our own mocap suit on top of the mocap that we would get from Sony.
Right.
So I would have to go out. We'd have to wear the suit and go in the parking lot and
That's
film
awesome.
ourselves. And when I first heard, when I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, oh, I really don't want to work on this game. I'm an animator. I don't want to do this.
Mm.
I mean, I didn't say that, but it was just my own internal
Right. Right.
thought. Ended up being the best like year and a half.
Hmm.
It was so fun because that was when I learned to love making games. Was on that
Interesting.
project, and it was kind of from then on that it was sort of like this graph of like once I worked on that game, I realized how much I enjoyed the challenges that are unique to games.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of some of the stuff you and I were talking about a little earlier, where it's like there's a lot of, while it can get frustrating in games because you have a lot of there really are technical limitations or there are gameplay requirements. Like for example, the player pressed forward, they just interrupted your nice opening the chest animation that you spent all that time on. Too bad,
Yeah.
That it can be frustrating because you are definitely, you have to work within like the limitations of the medium, right?
Right.
But the pros are like, depending on where you work, the pros can be really great. Like a lot less, you're not pleasing, you're usually working very closely with people, rather than, I think in film, at least what I've seen, sometimes it can be, director's making a call about something and
Mm-hmm.
you're like, okay, or maybe a director wants you to do something multiple, try this, try that, try
Mm-hmm.
this, try that. It just isn't that way. At least my experience in games has been, it is a lot less that way because it's usually smaller teams, so it's really fun to be able to do that stuff. So I have found over many years that while I didn't set out to go into games, that I don't know if I ever would go into film if I was offered. I don't know because I really enjoy it.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's funny because like that was actually one of the questions that I wrote down was like, I wrote down like what would be the biggest difference between like a game studio and feature when it comes to like day-to-day tasks.
Yeah.
Like is it like vastly different or is it like somewhat mix and match? So what, I don't know, what would you say
Right.
about that?
It definitely. I mean, obviously, I have to caveat it by saying it depends on what studio,
Mm-hmm.
depends on what film studio, depends on what game studio.
For sure.
If you're at an Ubisoft studio, it's probably very different than Riot,
Mm-hmm.
or like every studio's got their own structure.
Right.
So there's no one. I'm not gonna be able to give an answer that fits all of it. But my experience at Insomniac and my experience especially at Riot in particular, my day to day. Sorry, I mean cough drop.
Oh no,
So
it's fine.
bad. And tell me if you can hear like clicking or anything. Can you hear me licking? Oh, okay. I'm gonna spit it out. Hang on.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine.
No,
That's
my wife says she can hear it.
that's it's like ASMR, no?
Yeah, right. um, she was like making that licky noise. I was like, oh, you can hear me licking. I think my experience at Riot in particular has been that the amount of people involved in making decisions tends to be a lot less,
Hmm.
but a lot more connected. So whereas I think in film, again, not always, and I'm not in film, so it's only hearsay to me, but
Sure.
um, oftentimes it may be a director or an animation lead that says like, hey, can you do it this way please, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you'll get the kinds of people where you can put your own stamp on it, but sometimes they know exactly what they want, and it's you kind of got to execute their vision.
Right.
My experience has been that that is really not the case very often in games. It tends to be a lot more like, whoa, we hired you because you're the animator. Like, you tell us what is cool, you know?
Interesting.
So for these level ups that are playing, well, they're playing right now for me. I don't know when they're playing on Twitch, but
Mm-hmm.
it's, I mean, the team that's making these is like 4 or 5 of them. I mean, we have some help here and there from other sister teams, so to speak, but you know, the core, I mean, it's me
Mm-hmm.
and an art director that kind of come up with the previs. And it's not like the art director says, here's what the idea is. We sort of have an initial idea. We might do some storyboards. Anybody might do the story. It might be him, might be me,
Right.
might be somebody else in the brainstorm. But then from there, I just say, hey, I'm gonna make a previs today, and we just talk about it. I just show it to him. We talk about it. No, it's never like, okay, no, I want you to remove this and add this and do. It's he's like, well, what if we did this? And I'll say, yeah, I see what you're saying, but I don't know if that's gonna. Okay, what you know, it's just people having fun, like coming up with creative ideas,
It's awesome.
and that has been my experience more often than not
Mm-hmm.
at Riot in particular, but even at Insomniac. Not all the time at Insomniac. Insomniac was a little different, but you tend to be much more like in the trenches together, figuring it out together. It's kind of how games feel. You're figuring it out as you all go together.
Right.
And I don't know if film has that kind of feel quite as much, and it might be because games are a younger medium, so we really are figuring it out as we go. You know. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like from what I'm hearing from you and from others as well in the game industry, it's like, although you guys are, even though you might work for a big company, you guys are kind of like divided into like smaller teams, and it feels like very like, you know, like very few people within the team, and you guys kind of like figure things out together, like you said.
Yes.
s-
Yep.
So would you say like that's kind of like the highlight compared to like the feature, maybe pros and cons of that?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say so. Uh, I mean, for example, the team I'm on right now, anything you see that's animated or got effects
Mm-hmm.
in the game is done by more or less maybe 20-ish people, maybe 25-ish.
Hmm.
But that includes drawing and rigging and modeling and production and right. So like even just it's not that many people. I know 25 sounds like a lot, and I guess that can be a whole studio at some places,
Sure.
um, but for a AAA studio, that's a very small amount of people, a
Right.
very small amount of people. So, um, and I think that's a pro. I know everybody on my small section of my team,
Mm-hmm.
and that's yeah, I love that. I think it's something really cool.
Gotcha. So in terms of like work-life balance, I know that's like one of the questions I've had. I'm curious to know, um, and I don't know, maybe it's different from, you know, every studio, like when you're in Insomniac versus Riot, because it is a smaller team and because sometimes you may have to wear multiple hats. It's like, do you feel that it gets pretty busy, or like what is that like?
So the question is, what's it like when since the team is smaller, you might actually have to do things a little out of your animation zone. What's that like? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, that, and also like how does it affect like work-life balance in terms of like,
Oh,
does it increase your work hours when it comes to
right.
that, or no?
So Riot is particularly good. Again, Riot's a huge company, and
Mm-hmm.
like you said, there are a lot of projects now at Riot,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of projects, and within that project there are multiple teams. You know, so the answer is different for every team. But in
Sure.
general, Riot is extremely vocal from the top down about work-life balance,
Interesting.
like very vocal about it. They, in fact, they have like enacted policies that like make it so managers make sure that like my manager will come to me and say, "Hey, I've noticed you haven't taken a week off in quite a few months. You need
Interesting.
to take a week off." Like
That's awesome.
so, yeah, it's so they are very uh, they want to make sure that there is a work-life balance,
Hmm.
and they put their money where their mouth is. I mean, they really work hard to make sure that people taking time off and stuff. Because at the end of the day, like, games don't make themselves; people make them. You know, and they
Exactly.
want to make sure that the happy people make better stuff, right? So,
Right. Right. Yeah.
and they know it. So in general, Riot has a tremendously good work-life balance. The
Gotcha.
truth is, though, we work in a passion-based industry.
Mm.
I love what I do so much, and sometimes you want to go the extra mile on something, and so nobody has ever asked me at Riot. Nobody's ever said anything,
Mm-hmm.
but I have definitely worked a lot of hours at Riot sometimes here and there. Like, in fact, just a couple months ago, to make a big push on the set that we're currently working on,
Mm-hmm.
me and a couple other artists, we really want this to be awesome, and we're pushing really hard to do some new big things.
Hmm.
And it just took a lot of hours. So,
Right.
but nobody asked, and if my boss, had been aware, they probably would have been like, "Can you not do that?" But
Sure.
and that's just a reality. Is like, when you love what you do, it can be tricky, right?
Right.
Even when a studio is there to fully support and make sure you are working a healthy amount of hours,
Sure.
you still have to make sure you're working a healthy amount of hours.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know how to answer questions shortly, but
No. That's
um,
awesome.
so long story short, Riot really wants you to have a work-life balance, and I do my best to maintain a work-life balance. Um, as far as, like, does the work, especially does going outside of my animation zone, ever increase the amount of time? Yeah, I mean, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the truth is, like, for example, when I'm working on something, if I realize, depending on the level of complexity, if something's wrong in the rig,
Right.
I'll stop and I'll go fix it. You know what I mean? Because I can,
Mm-hmm.
unless it's really complex, then I won't. But and yeah, it just adds time to my day. But I wouldn't ask a junior to do that, or even a mid. That's more like, if you have that level of comfort and you can still hit your deadline, then yeah, go for it. And it
Mm-hmm.
helps the tech team out, because the tech team at every studio is always overloaded.
Yeah.
So any little bit you can do to take something off their plate, they're so thankful for.
Gotcha. Awesome. Someone asked a question in the chat. It says, has Riot ever thought about animating out a world's final team battle? I know they made skins for the winning team, but it might be cool to see a team battle in a film-like way.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm sure somebody somewhere has thought of something like that. I'm sure somebody is pushing to do that somewhere. Yeah, there's so many cool ideas. That's a cool idea.
Hmm.
I mean, we had to. This isn't quite what they're asking, but they did the videos, 7 or 8 years. I mean, they've done a couple. I think we teamed up with Blur Studios to do where it's like a 5-on-5 battle.
Yeah.
And they're really cool looking. But that's the closest I think we've gotten. Yeah, we didn't. It wasn't a world based thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a cool idea for sure.
Okay.
I'll do it. I'll work on it if you. Yeah, come to Riot. Let's do it.
Yeah. Start the previs already.
That's right. Yeah.
Let's see. Allison asked, what's your favorite part about working in games? And if you could get the chance in the future, what's one project you like to work on that you haven't yet? Would it be personal or a side project or a well-known IP?
Okay, so favorite part about working in games, and then what would I make if I could make anything?
Yeah.
Good question. It's funny, I looked at all these questions beforehand, and I still didn't formulate answers.
No, it's fine.
What would I work on if I could work? Or also, what's my favorite part? I think there's a couple things that I love about working in games. I personally love animating action. I'm not. It's not that I wouldn't do an acting shot, and in fact, I used to do a lot of acting shots. I would do cinematics, and then before that, when I was learning, I, like every animator, you do your acting shots.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to think that's what I really liked, and it's only recently that I realized, when I look back on all my old work, all of my acting. If you go look at all my acting, and it's funny, the other animators used to joke with me. All of my acting is very, like, physical. Like, I would have characters be like, "Well, I don't know what you know." And it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't like I wasn't pantomime. It wasn't like poorly done. It's just that I always tried to find ways to get to get movement in there, to get
Mm-hmm.
action in there. And it's
Sure.
only been the past few years that I realized, oh, it's because I like animating action more than I actually like animating acting.
Yeah.
Like if somebody was like I'll tell you right now, the number one thing I can't stand about doing games, I hate animating idols. I hate
Interesting.
it. And unless it is an idol where it's like the character's doing something, but if it's like an idol, the games need them. If it's an idol where the character's just kind of not doing much and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
chilling, oh my god, I can't stand it.
Sure.
And it's the same with acting. Like if somebody said, "Do you want to do a very slow, emotional
Sure. Something more
zoom
subtle.
in to
Yeah.
somebody with," and I'd be like, oh, "Not really. No, I don't want to do that. Give that to somebody who's really good at it."
Yeah, yeah.
So what I love about games is it's probably the best place right now in the industry to do action-based stuff. I mean, the only other place that consistently has action is like commercial houses or like VFX studios,
Mm-hmm.
like ILM or something.
Sure.
But there's all sorts of those are tough places to work.
Sure.
So that's one of the best things. And then I also just love the problem solving aspect of games because their games are like the gigantic complex puzzles to build. Like to make a game is like solving a puzzle. It's very hard and very complex, but it's very mentally stimulating. So it's fun
Sure.
to be like. And I think also the other thing is they are still a young medium, and
Hmm.
so not everything is figured out yet. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas in film, the process is pretty well known. It's 100 years we've been making films. We know how to make films.
For sure.
Um, so it's fun to be like, gosh, how do we do this? I don't know. And somebody will say, what if we just flip this thing? Would that work? And it kind of sounds stupid. And you're like, oh my gosh, it works. I love that stuff. So that's a lot of fun.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then what would I work on if I could work on anything? That's a good question. Oh man, I don't know the answer to that. There's definitely studios whose work I love.
Hmm.
So maybe it's like if I could work at those studios, maybe. I mean, I don't know anything about them. Maybe they're terrible places.
Sure, sure.
I love gosh, I mean, Zelda game.
Hmm.
Yeah, basically Nintendo. If I could work on Nintendo aesthetics, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
But gosh, I don't know, man. I mean, to be honest, there's what I'm doing right now is so satisfying
That's awesome.
that it's hard for me to see past that because I'm in this valley of plenty and I can't see anything past the mountains because I'm just so happy with you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So
yeah.
who knows? In a year or two, maybe I'm tired of it and then I'm like, oh, I wish I could go work on a Nintendo game, but
Yeah.
um,
It's interesting.
yeah, I don't know.
Well, let me throw you another question.
Yeah.
Because like as like, especially like feature film animators, when we see other films, like especially like whatever smaller studio whatnot, we always like look at the animation side of it, and especially if they're bad, we're like, oh, like there are things that we can fix there, or like there are things we could do better in there. And do you ever kind of like, as a gameplay, like do you ever like play a game or see a game from a trailer or whatnot, and then are there things that make you either cringe or like it's like something that you would love to like change, like if you could like dive in there?
Yeah.
Like have you ever had those moments?
On a game I've worked on or just on a
Just
game?
anything.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh gosh, yeah. I'm trying to think of one. I have to be. I don't want to disparage other
Oh, for
games or
sure.
anything, but
Yeah.
it's hard not to
Yeah, it could
answer that
be
question.
example of like what you've seen maybe.
There's definitely been games where. Well, here. I'll just be honest. So I love the Assassin's Creed
Mm-mm.
franchise. I don't love every single game in the franchise, but
Right.
I do think that franchise. I'm a history nut.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought the original few games had such a fun storyline and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But Assassin's Creed, until the newest one, I'm playing Valhalla right now, and it
Same.
looks like they
Yeah.
okay, nice. They did some good work on the faces. The facial expressions are a lot better in this game, but
Mm-hmm.
boy, basically Odyssey and Origins and Odyssey, man, the little the in-game cutscenes that they do, they're bad. Man. They were really bad. Like the facial animation was really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, to a point where I was like, this is like pulling me out of it, you know?
Yeah.
and my wife and I talk about it all the time. I think that's an area of games that it's getting there,
Yeah.
but it's not at the high. It's not top priority yet
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
fix. But so it's like that's stuff that I see consistently in a lot of games that bothers the heck out of me. Now, you go look at like Naughty Dog's games,
Mm.
they don't have that problem. Their facial animation's incredible
Mm-hmm.
for a few reasons. I mean, one, those are some of the most talented people in the industry are at that studio. Just technically, just really smart people there.
Right.
But also their cinematics they outsource a lot of that facial animation to studios that 100% only do facial animation.
Right, right.
So it's gonna look great compared to like Assassin's Creed. It's all procedural and
Right.
you know, that's just not what Assassin's Creed just doesn't care as much. They got too many other, they're trying to solve a lot of problems, and that's another thing about games is, and it's true in film too. But I don't think you see the edges as much in film.
Mm-hmm.
In games, the scope of what games are trying to make. Again, this is not a knock on film. It's just film is a 2-hour experience, and then you're done.
Right, right.
So it's not as hard to just throw a lot of bodies at that work, and it's gonna look pretty good.
Right.
Games, you're talking about. I mean, Valhalla is like, if you do the game as fast as you can, it's a 40 to 50-hour experience,
Crazy.
and that's just the core game. So like you're gonna see the rough edges somewhere. You know what I mean?
Right.
So but yeah, facial animation is a big one that I
Gotcha.
see consistently.
Gotcha.
Trying to think if there's something else. Hand contacts, I can't stand when I see. And again, games are getting better and better, but I hate when you can tell hands aren't actually touching surfaces and like.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I can't stand that. And then this is one that's just driven me nuts since the beginning of time. And this is just true of all animation. I think hands. I mean, they teach this. This isn't like my belief. Hands are such an expressive part of our bodies.
Right.
I can't stand when animators overlook good hand poses. I hate it. I
Mm-hmm.
can't stand it.
Yeah.
So one that's always bothered me, and it comes up in games a lot, is like a character's holding a weapon, right?
Yeah.
Put the effort into what does a fist look like, right? Like so many times I see like this.
Oh yeah, the classic. Yeah.
Like, oh, he's holding something or whatever, or like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's so minor, but that's something that's a personal thing that I always look for, and as soon as I see it, I'm like, oh, that just kills me.
Yeah, gotcha. It's funny when you're talking about facial animation, like that kind of reminded me of Mass Effect when the latest Mass Effect came out, and then that was like a huge, like it became a huge meme over it and everything. And I was so into Mass Effect like franchise that I was like, I bet it's bad, but I need to play it. I just gotta see it. And then man, I was surprised. I was surprised how bad it was.
I know, and it was a big deal within the industry. And it's funny, all the developers like at other studios were like, nobody blamed the developers because we all understood it was probably not their fault. It was like
sure,
their publisher put pressure on them to release it faster or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because every developer's been in that situation where you're like, it's not like the people who worked at that studio thought this looked great. They
sure.
knew it didn't look good. They didn't have a choice.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's another. As a side note, that's another reason why Riot is a very different studio. Is because while we are owned by Tencent, they're not really our publisher. We publish. So the difference. So when I was at Insomniac, going off on a tangent.
Sure, it's fine.
When I was at Insomniac, we were at the time Insomniac was an independent studio, so we would always have a publisher. It was usually Sony, but I think EA did one of our games. Whatever, it doesn't matter. And the truth is, while you want to make players happy, you really want to make your publisher happy because they fund you and they kind of decide if you get to make another game with them. So
right.
Whereas in Riot just self-publishes. There's no publisher to make happy. So we really do get to be like, will players like this? If the answer is yes, then it's just a question of like, what do we need to do to make it?
Right.
So that's partly why Riot is a very different experience.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Okay. trying to see what kind of questions we can ask. Um,
I also have another reel I can walk through if we run out of questions.
sure. What I guess we can go into like a student type of thing where what would you say, like what will benefit the most as a student trying to get into the game industry? Like, are there things that you see too much from a game reel, and are there things that you wish to see more from students when they apply to, places like Riot? So I guess it kind of goes to like, what kind of things you want to see in a reel when they apply to these studios.
That's good. Yeah. I'll give you, so some of the things that are always good to see, and you'd be surprised how often you don't see it. When you're making a demo reel for games, make things look like a game. Pick a camera from a game. Pretend you're making something for League. Pretend you're making something from Street Fighter, and stick to those limitations, right? If you want to do an Overwatch intro or play of the game cinematic, great, do that. Make it look like play of the game, you'd be surprised how often we get demo reels that their actions, it's a 3-hit combo, but it's not from a camera that I've ever seen in any game. It's just like a side profile,
right?
Orthographic view or something, and I'm like, make it look like a game. You know what I mean? So the best demo reels are the ones where if they really like League of Legends, they're gonna set their camera up from that top-down 30-degree or whatever view it is.
Right.
And gosh, go the extra mile. Some people will go. You can get the League of Legends assets. I don't know how, but I think there's ways to get them online because people can rip them from the download.
Right.
Man, just mock that scene up. Like, it's just that extra mile. Like, make it look like the game. Maybe it's not always animation, right? That's not strictly an animation, but spending that little extra time,
right,
to make it look like a game. What it does is it says to me that you really want to work in games. It's not just that you want to animate. You want to animate in games, and that's a big thing in games. Is we're always looking for people who. It's not hard to find people who want to animate. There's a lot of people in the world who want to animate.
For sure.
It's harder to find people who are like, I want to animate, but I really am excited about the unique challenges about games. Because those are people that stick, right?
Yeah.
I can hire the world's greatest film animator, but man, the second that I tell them that they have to cut an animation down because it doesn't feel good when you play the game because it takes too long,
right?
How happy are they going to be?
Right.
Versus somebody who's like, oh, I love games, I play games all the time, and oh yeah, I totally understand that, right? That person's going to enjoy the challenges. They're going to want to stay. So
right.
So when you do things like that on your demo reel, it shows me that you are really excited about games. So I would love to see that stuff. Now, this is, again, a lot of things that'll set you apart aren't always animation related. But find things to do that kind of tell me who you are. I mean, do a 3-hit combo by all means. Do a 5-hit combo. Those things are great. That's probably like a staple. You probably should have that on a game's demo reel somewhere. But think of a way to make it for you. Like, even it's not really nice of me to use my own demo reel as a good example. That's bad form. But on my demo reel here, I'll pause. I mean, these things are all personal to me, right? Like, my personal work, like, I love birds, right? So I'll have an owl character. You know what? I love birds so much, I'll do another owl character. And here, look, it looks like, I mean, this is a game, but but let me show it in a way where it's clear that it's a game.
Right.
I love history. I was studying India at the time, so I was like, oh, let me make like a little game in kind of a classic India period here. I mean, look, another bird. And I love Roman. I'm a huge Roman history nut. So I was like, let me combine those two things, right? And if you're not to get a little corny here, but if you're true to yourself and you're like, these are the things that excite me, put them. Find a way to get them on your demo reel. Don't just download, the grayscale guy or girl and animate with a sword, and that's fine. And if you do a really good job, that will be enough. But
Sure.
spend a little extra time and I don't know, color it, turn it into the Hulk, right? If you love Marvel, make it the Hulk then, right? Like something, anything.
Interesting.
Yeah, personality. Right?
Gotcha. So I guess with that said, like, do you see a pattern of like type of shots that come in a lot that's like you wish you could tell students not to do, or like kind of try to avoid that in their reels?
Yes. Don't put idols on your reel. And this doesn't go to my dislike of doing idols. It's more that unless the idol is like, unless it's a very cool, active, really well animated idol. But I see so many times students will put, okay, that's great that you had an attack, and then they'll cut to that character doing an idol for 5 or 6 seconds. And unfortunately, what it does is two things. It's like, idols aren't that hard to animate, so it doesn't show me that it doesn't show me anything, right? It doesn't prove to me that you've mastered some technical understanding of animation. It's just taking up space on your demo reel, and in fact, it's hurting you because it's boring. And because I love pacing, like demo reel pacing is really fun to me, so I'm extra sensitive to it. But it just kills the pacing of a demo reel. So I just would cut any idol you have on a demo reel. Nobody cares unless it's a really cool idol, unless there's something really personality driven about it, or it's just really neat.
Yeah.
At that point, it's probably barely an idol, but like the League of Legends stuff, like the jokes and the laughs, you might be able to call those idols because they kind of are. They're triggered by input, but they are kind of idols. And there are some idols, and I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there definitely are some idols that are actually really cool idols. Okay, that's fine if that's what you want to put on. All right, but hey, I'm just standing here and I'm doing this and I'm looking around.
Right.
Man, don't put that. And I see that a lot.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Gotcha. Would you? I remember like some students who I've had and previous students, like they would be interested in going to games, but they would also do like, I don't know, like an acting shot or something that's like kind of like non-gameplay. Is that recommended to put into, or do you recommend that they really get more specific in terms of like if they're applying as a gameplay animator, just gameplay animation, or is it okay to like throw in like, I don't know, something that's not necessarily gameplay but more like a test they did with like some characters?
Yeah, I would. Sorry, I'm gonna chew this piece of ham.
Oh, it's fine. We'd love to hear it.
When my wife teaches, I told her, I was like, hey, she'd come out and her throat would hurt. I'd say you should have lozenges while you're teaching.
Yeah.
It's a good idea. So now I'm doing it, but this stupid thing.
It's fine.
So the short answer is there's absolutely nothing wrong with putting a good acting test on a games reel.
Okay.
Absolutely, good animation is good animation. And game animators, we're animators, like we get it. We love any good animation is good animation. But the brutal truth is you are applying for a position that is a physical based animation, right?
Interesting.
And chances are you're rarely, unless you're applying to a job where you're going to be doing a lot of cinematics. Like if for example, like the new Crash Bandicoot or like Spyro, or right, if you're applying to a team where they do acting as well as the physical stuff, definitely put your acting, because that's cinematic, that's acting animation, so yes. But like Riot, it's never say never, and who knows what Riot will make. I don't know everything Riot's making, so
sure.
I don't say this with any secret knowledge. Who knows?
Right.
Maybe there's a team somewhere where that's more important.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, my knowledge is not so much.
Right.
You're probably going to be animating physical actions, so stick to that for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
If you have one shot on there of acting, that's fine. You know what I mean? But I would weight it towards physical.
Gotcha.
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's see.
One in chat here. do you get a rough timing scope for animations in planning, or is it a constant iteration? I'd imagine animation is at the final part of the process, and designers use existing characters to block out abilities. Okay, yeah, that's a good question. It depends. Obviously, every game has its own way of working. And the game I'm on, there's no characters. It's a card game, so it's a unique situation.
Sure.
But other games that I've worked on at Riot and Insomniac, it's a tough one, especially if you're doing enemies. I like working on enemies most if I'm working like in game on characters. Right now I'm doing something that's very cinematic based. There's no input. So what I'm doing right now with these level ups, they're mini movies really. Like it's almost not fair to call them game animation. They're little cinematic 5-second moments. But when I'm doing stuff for in game, like proper in game with input and all that good stuff, I like to do enemies because users can't press a button and stop the enemy from playing an animation.
Sure.
So the animator part of me likes enemies because I get a little bit of both worlds. I get to solve the puzzle of how do we build this enemy, but I also get to like, hey, he's gonna do this attack and it's not gonna get interrupted by somebody pressing a button.
Right.
Now when it comes to like the hero characters, that is a whole other level, and that is a tough job, and I've done it here and there enough to know that that's a tough job, and it almost requires a split animator where you have good aesthetics, but you also have a very good technical understanding of how the character is built under the hood, right? Visual scripting and all that stuff, because that's how you're gonna get the best looking characters.
Gotcha.
So sorry, I'm getting there. So what the answer to your question is you usually, for something like a hero character, it's pretty, designers and programmers will kind of go in and mock something up. Usually it's a designer, programmer, artist. There's some combination of that really owns prototyping out a character. So, like, for example, at Insomniac, on Sunset Overdrive, or whatever, on Sunset Overdrive, I was the hero. There was no hero lead because it was pre-production, but I was the animator working on the hero with the programmer. So it was us two doing anything. And whenever somebody said, it would be cool if the hero could do this, it was up to us to figure out how to do that. So oftentimes what would happen is the programmer would just mock something up, and they probably wouldn't have an animation, so the character would just T-pose. He'd be like, hey, I put a jump in. Right, and the character would just go to T-pose because there's no animation, and then he'd get back to his run.
Right.
And so I'd say, okay, and he'd say, here's roughly how long it is. We can change it if we want. So I do an animation, and then I'll go, it'd be better. I did an animation. I think it'd be better if it was a little shorter, blah, 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 right? And it kind of becomes this, it's a football that you're passing back and forth, right? There are times, like in League, where it can get frustrating because a designer, now League is much more design driven, where the designers do exactly what PLNRND asked, which is like they'll mock it up with like a cube or something. They'll be like, okay, on this new champ, his Q will do this, his W will do that, and on the W it'll happen in 4 frames. So go figure that out, animator. You have 4 frames to work with. I mean, it really will be like that sometimes. And you're like, and you got to fight to be like, can I have 1 extra frame? That's the hard part about being an animator in games, because sometimes you just want to make something look good, even if that means I need 20 frames. Can I just make it look good, please?
Right.
So it's a balance, because a lot of times what'll happen is the animators will go animate something really cool, and they'll be like, do you want this really cool thing in the game? Then you got to give me more frames, right? So it's a negotiation.
Right. Gotcha.
So yeah, and it's tough.
Okay.
Okay, so let me ask Major Link 9. I think this was addressed before, but if in a demo reel
using a character,
existing character Mario Link, and I sent my real Nintendo, would they be concerned or upset on how I got this model? That's a good question. I don't know. How did you get that model?
Yeah, if it was like fan made, maybe. I mean,
Yeah, I can't speak for. The only experience I can speak from is my experience. If I saw what was clearly a model from one of our games that I know for a fact was not in any way publicly available, I don't think I would blame the artist. I think I would just be like, how the heck did that get out there?
Right.
I think at the end of the day, the only people who are going to see your demo reel, there's not going to be corporate people reviewing your demo reel. The only people that are ever going to see demo reels are other animators.
Right.
That's
Right.
it.
Yeah.
And we know, like, look, if it's available online, if it's out there, it's out there. You know what I mean? It's not your fault that it's out there. You're going to, hey, if you know, if Darius's league model got leaked and animators started animating with it, I don't blame the animators, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So as a person who has reviewed and does review demo reels and hires people and looks at demo reels all day and stuff, I don't care.
Hmm.
I may wonder how the heck it got out there, but it
Yeah.
doesn't bother me, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Going off of that, like, do you like, let's say people do submit, like, let's say for Riot with the model that was publicly available. Now, do you see students like get in the trap of like kind of like doing the animation that's kind of like already that exists in the game? Like, do you wish to see like students that take the character and kind of go
Right.
beyond that? Like, some maybe it's different.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question actually. Um, yeah, it's a good piece of advice, which is if you are going to use who cares how you got it? If you're going to use a model that looks like one of our characters that's supposed to be Darius
Mhm.
or is Darius, um, it can be tricky because now you're kind of it's almost the same problem of if you're going to do an acting shot and you use a piece of dialogue from an animated movie, you've already made your life harder because people are already thinking of a really well animated shot. You
Right.
now have to do better on it. So it's kind of the same thing where if you take one of our characters, let's just say Garen. I always use Garen because he's kind of staple. If you take Garen and you're like, um, you know, okay, I'll use Garen. I'm so bad. I use my stuff as examples, but it's not because I think I'm good. It's because I can only remember the things I work on. I have such a bad memory for other things.
Sure.
It actually is a really hard thing to remember reference for me. But so for Garen, I did the one-handed push-up. He has like a joke. I think it's been a while since I played League, so I can't remember what button
Sure.
he pressed to play his joke. But and he does like a one-handed push-up, and I think his dialogue is like, "Look, Ma, I'm holding the world." If you are like, "Oh, I want to do Garen. I want to do a Garen joke," uh, you know, then you got to do better than the one-handed push-up because that's what people know. They're like, "Oh, Garen does the one-handed push-up." So if you do something that doesn't feel very Garen or isn't, you know, just like that's not how Garen would do that, or you know,
Right.
you're on your back foot. It's one argument, I guess, to be like do a character that people don't know, or do a character that isn't, you know, a blank model, I guess, or that's an argument for that, I suppose. But
Sure.
yeah, I mean, if you're gonna pick a known character, you gotta do it in character for sure.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. I have a question. And I don't know if it has changed over the years when you first started to now. Is there anything in terms of like your workflow that has changed to kind of fit the needs of like gameplay kind of animation, or is it pretty like same how you started animation to now?
Right.
Or is there anything that kind of helps you, like tips and tricks, or yeah?
Well, they didn't have layers in Maya when I started, so I use layers. That's one thing. Can you imagine not having layers? Dude?
Yeah.
Let me think. Okay, well, I'll answer it from two directions. One is this is just something I have changed in my own personal process, something I've evolved. But then I will talk about stuff that I do specifically for games. One thing is like I find myself when I was first in the industry, I was a diehard like blocking.
Right.
Don't show in linear, don't show in spline. You show blocked, right? I wasn't a jerk about it or anything, but I just was like, that's the right way to do it. And as I've gotten older, and maybe it's just because I've been doing it long enough that I'm more comfortable with it. But like, I find myself for a lot of shots, sometimes I'll just animate in spline. I don't, I don't even. And maybe that's because I'm like, oh, I know what the poses are. I'm not uncomfortable looking at spline. I know what's there and what to ignore.
Yeah.
So that's something that like my personal process has changed. Is I find myself animating more and more in spline. Now, for physical stuff, I think you can do that. If somebody gave me a very intimate, slow acting shot, I don't know. Maybe that wouldn't be the way to do it. I don't know. But for physical stuff, I find that spline is I like animating in spline.
Gotcha.
And then as far as like if there's any workflow things that I do that kind of cater to games, not. I mean, there's definitely things you'll do as far as like technically, like in certain files, you'll use layers in a certain way because. So, for example, like on Sunset Overdrive, I was doing early on. I was doing the hero animations for like, run forward, backward, left, right, strafe, all that stuff. Aim while you're doing all of that.
Right.
And the way you'll build that in Maya, you kind of replicate how a game engine does it using layers. So, because that's how a game engine works. A game engine says like you have an upper body, you have a lower body, and it plays different animations over top of each other. So you'll build your files in Maya to allow for that. So you'll have your aim on one layer, and so that way you can kind of see it in Maya.
Gotcha.
So I mean, like technically there are ways I'll build a file. But I would say more something else that I also do, and it's not necessarily about games, but it's just depending on the project I'm on, I do work differently depending on how many people I have to show. How many layers do I have to go through before I can get something approved? So a good example, and this is true in film. I think this is true in any. But I like to end my scenes with a clean scene. I bake all my layers down. Everything's ready. Even sometimes, depending on because of game engines being odd, sometimes I might even bake every control out. That has to do with how game engines interpolate half frames and stuff like that. So there's technical reasons why we would do that versus you may not need to do that in film.
Right.
But sometimes I might end a scene by being like, cool, it's done. I'm going to bake everything out, which means I have keys on everything on every frame.
Right.
Obviously don't want to do that till the very end if I can help it. Which means over the years, you really have to learn like when can I pull the trigger on that, because it really sucks to get a note after you've done that.
Right.
So what I've done is I've kind of learned like, okay, like how many layers should I keep? Should I keep these layers around, like the overlap on the tail? I shouldn't bake that down yet because they may have notes on that. So
right.
You just kind of learn when it's safe to move to the next stage of your process, I guess is a good way to think about it.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Let's see. And okay. I guess this question could be more about like, what do you, so you to join, this mentorship program through KYOSIL, and you also do mentoring at Riot as well. Is there something that you want to bring to the table in terms of like, type of education or type of learning that you want to see more of versus like, how it's been taught like before when you first started as a student? Is there something that you want to help the students specifically in terms of like, maybe it's like a, I don't know, new type of learning method or whatever it is? Like, what would you want to bring?
I think the things that I wish I had and that I still don't see enough of are, and I know KYOSIL is doing it because my wife is in KYOSIL and she does a lot of this. It astounds me how few places, whether it's physical brick and mortar colleges or digital colleges, how few places do demos. It blows my mind. So I this year I was like, hey, I want to learn how to play tennis. It's a sport I can do where I'm not near anybody. It's a safe sport to do during these crazy times. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna do that, and I've been doing that for about 5 months. And I found somebody online who's teaching me, a coach, And I use that analogy when I'm talking with my wife and I'm getting all worked up about it, because I'm like, can you imagine if I was like, hey, I want to learn how to play tennis, and all this person did was like read a lesson plan to me, or review my, review footage of me playing, but like at some point you're like, well, can you show me? Like, what do you mean? You know what I mean?
Right, right.
Now again, I don't know. Maybe some schools are better at it than others, I'm sure. But
Sure.
I know my experience was in college was virtually no demos. Like,
Mm-hmm.
to be fair, I went to a small college that we didn't exactly get to pull in ex Disney animators, but
Sure.
and so it's something that I've always thought is crazy, is that there's just not enough demos. My mentor, the person who's an unofficial mentor, but my mentor at Insomniac, I mean, if I was struggling or something, he would sit right down at my desk. I had one day actually, and you will have these days, and they're not fun, but boy, will you learn. You'll have days where you're like, I don't know what's going on, but I can't animate, and you'll go into freak out mode, right? And you'll have a lot of these early in your career,
Right.
and less and less as you get older. But where you're like, oh my god, this is the day. I'm gonna get fired. I don't know what I'm doing. And this is an easy shot. How am I not doing this, right? Every animator has these moments.
For sure.
And I had one really bad one after a couple of years at Insomniac. I'd already been animating a couple of years, and I had one of these moments where it was just like I just lost all my knowledge. And he sat down at my desk. He was awesome, man. He sat down at my desk. He's like, let's just go through it together. And he sat there for 8 hours, and he animated, and he taught me, and he talked, and he just talked about what he was doing. He's like, okay, well, let's work on this shot. Here's what I'm doing here, and here's why I would do it this way. And not only that, I mean, the beautiful thing of being in person too was I could just watch. He would do a hotkey, and I'd be like, whoa, and I would say, hang on, what was that hotkey? Oh, I pressed this, and it, and I'd go, oh my god, I didn't know about that, right? So there's something so powerful about seeing somebody do something, because you learn, you see how they think and how they work, and I just think those things are so powerful. So that's what I'm really excited to do, is like, of course, feedback, absolutely, but also like showing like how we build stuff and answering questions about like, how would you do this? How do you do that? Does this matter? I don't know,
Yeah.
So.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I mean, every mentor obviously at KYOSIL has different way of teaching here and there, but yeah, I think a lot of our focus is that trying to like kind of like basically ask like what students' needs are and like what they want to see, and like kind of like what you hit the nail on is like, like showing demos is like as awesome it is to get like, theories and like type of things like fundamentals, but yeah, and like it's like at some point you kind of basically just have to execute it and like make the mistakes and just doing it. And then I think also like just doing the demos in front of the students actually shows like, just the entire work process. And sometimes maybe you might make a mistake and be like, oh, like this is something I would avoid doing, and then like here's why I would do that. Yeah, so I think like having demos be part of our way of teaching, I think has helped students a lot. So I'm actually curious to see how you would do that with game centered kind of things as well, because like yeah, I don't know, like in terms of featured animation, it could be like the shots of characters just moving, but in terms of like for game, I wonder, I don't know, is there something specific that you would love to like show demos on? Yeah.
So what I'm excited to do is I still have to talk to my I gotta confirm that I can do this, but I think it should be okay. But what I want to do is use a couple of production. I want to show you guys what I really do with shots. Like, I really want to take stuff from our game and show you what I would do. So the cool thing is we work with Perforce, which is a versioning software. So what's neat is I can go back to old versions of things. So I have all my blocking. Like, I can go back. I can set a file to be back a version where it's like, oh, this is what it was when I was blocking it. And so I can show you. I can sit down and go, okay, it's a blocking, but now I'm going to take it into spline. Let's see what that looks like, right? I got to get permission to make sure that I can do those things. So I can't guarantee, but I think it should be fine. But if I can't do it with production assets, I have my own. I have a million things I made that will do it with.
Sweet.
So like those are the kinds of things I'm excited to do, is like, because I know that feeling. of, oh, I just finished my blocking and my blocking looks really good, and then you hit spline, right? Every animator hates that moment.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh god, I'm back. Oh geez, you know. And so, how do you wrestle through that jungle of like, I just moved from blocking to spline,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And then for games, I mean, this is true of film, but in physical action, it's extremely true. It's like, what do you do to find the texture? Because texture is just so important in like a 3-hit combo, right?
Right.
It's easy to do something that's like 1, 2, 3, right?
Right.
So what do we do when we have something, and how do we inject more texture into it as we're going? And
Interesting.
and when do you think about those things? Like, is that important in the blocking phase? If I move from blocking to spline and it's still not there, is it too late? You know what I mean? Just stuff like that.
Right.
You know?
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah.
Cool. So in terms of going off of that, like, what do you think would be the biggest advice for students? Because I think, especially this year, I think a lot of students, even professionals, I think with the COVID and everything, like our motivation level has like dropped so low, and like it's hard for, it's like, even though we're like home all the time, like it's hard for a lot of
Yeah.
us to like be productive. And I think this rings true, especially for students who are looking for jobs, especially in this time of pandemic where it's like kind of like really difficult to find one. um and yeah, and like just something that you wish, like, if you could go back and like tell yourself like this advice, like what would it be? Like what would be things that would help you to kind of get motivated?
Right. That's a good question. Um, so I'll say this: there's a couple things. So I'll say a couple things.
Sure.
Um, One, don't ever hesitate to reach out to other people. It's something that I kind of struggled with, and I'll probably always struggle with this a little bit. Is like, it's funny because in my professional life, I am Mr. Collaborative. I love being like, come on, let's all link arms, and you do this and I'll do that. But in my personal work, for so many years, I had this. I guess it might have been a chip on my shoulder a little bit of like, I want to do it all.
Mm,
I want to prove that I can do it all,
mm,
right? I think that was how for so long I felt like I could stand out. You know what I mean?
I
As I
see.
was like, maybe I'm not the greatest animator, but if I do, if I model rig texture, concept, effects, then I'll stand out.
Mm,
And there's a little bit of truth to that, but the downside of that was I rarely sought out help. I
mm,
really collaborated, right? Um, you know, it was only, it took me years into my career before I started saying like the thing that's playing right here. I was like, hey, you know, hey Adam Phillips. Now, granted, this is personal or this is professional work, but Adam Phillips did these effects,
mm-hmm.
and that was the effects animator that I ended up working with to do my owl and wolf fighting sequence, right?
Right.
And the truth is, by doing that, I got something so much cooler,
Mm,
right? Like, instead of me being like, no, I'm going to make the effects, I reached out to somebody who, you know, one big piece of advice would be like, there are other people out there who want to make cool things.
mm-hmm.
And all it takes is, you would be so surprised just emailing somebody and saying like, hey, I know you've never heard of me. I love your work. I've seen your effects that
Mm,
you make in Unity. I'm an animator. I'm learning. You know, would you ever be interested in just, if I animated a 3-hit combo and gave you the FBX, would you want to put it in a game and put some effects over it? And what's cool about that, you'd be surprised how people would say, "Oh my gosh, yes, please!" Right?
mm,
Having another person that you kind of beholden to, right? You're kind of both working on something. Man, the levels of motivation will go through the roof.
mm.
Um, and what's cool is when you finish, you both have something that is so much cooler for your demo reel than if you had just put that animation on your demo. Now you
Interesting.
got an animation with like cool effects on it, right?
Mm,
So that's like a big thing is like, don't ever hesitate to reach out to somebody on the internet and just say, hey, would you ever want to make, the worst thing they can say is no.
right.
Okay. And there's so many artists on there. So for example, right now, and this is kind of another piece of advice, but sort of in the same wheelhouse, which is, I want to do a little. I'm looking to do a little animation on the side,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, you know, I don't want to. I've spent so many years modeling and texturing, rigging. and it's fun, but it really by the time I get to the animation, I'm tired. It takes months for me to do it, and then I don't want to do it anymore, right?
Right.
So I was like, I think this time I'm gonna try to be better. I'm gonna reach out to artists. There's so many good artists on ArtStation that make these gorgeous models.
Right.
And I was like, I'll just email a bunch of them. So I have a Google Doc where I just have all these artists and links to their work, and have I emailed them yet? Yes, no. Have they responded? I'm just keeping track. And all I do is I write a really nice email. I say, like, your work is really great. Here's what I would like to do with it. It's just for my own personal work. It's not commercial. Would you be okay sending me the model? I'll rig it. Would you mind?
Hmm.
Right? And
Right.
you wouldn't believe how many people are like, oh my gosh, yeah, that would be so cool.
Hmm.
And so if you're ever feeling a little bit like, I don't know what to make, or I don't know how to stand out,
Hmm.
there is so much cool art being made by other people who are just as excited as you are and would love to see you animate something with their model or with their rig. So
Hmm.
yeah, never hesitate to just ask somebody. And man, I'll tell you right now, when somebody emails you their model and you open it up and it's this awesome looking model, your motivation's gonna amp up right there. You're like, oh, I can't wait to animate this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 Oh,
And
that's
if you don't
awesome.
know how to rig, get a cool model from somebody. Reach out to a tech artist somewhere and say, hey, I got a cool model. Would you mind rigging it? I'll animate it. We all put it on our demo reels.
Hmm.
Right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never thought of. Yeah, I never thought of that. It's because like as students, we're always just like looking for like a already published rig out there somewhere.
Right.
But the beauty of I think collaborating with other students who are also like have the same mentality of hunger to get into the
Right.
industry, who want to prove something. I think that's kind of awesome to see. Like even if it takes a bit to like get that all set up, like
Yep.
the effort and like the fact that it goes into your reel and something that no one has seen before, I think that could speak volumes too. So that's pretty sweet.
Exactly. Yeah, like the thing I'm trying to do right now, it's probably only gonna be like a little 10, 15 second little animation, a little cinematic kind of, very similar to like a level ups I'm doing. I just want to do something a little bigger.
Yeah.
Um, and and I've been emailing people. I mean, it's probably been 2 months
Mm.
that I'm waiting to I get a model from somebody, and then I
Mm-hmm.
get a model from somebody, and I'm actually doing a little bit of like mix and match with some pieces
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, oh, I like the hands on this one, but the body on, so I'm, and somebody says, oh yeah, sure, I'll give you the model, but it takes 3 weeks for them to send it to me, and it's like,
Sure.
that's okay. So yeah, you're right. It, like exactly how you said, like it may take some time, but you know what? At the end, once that thing's done and it put on your demo reel, like you said, it's like nobody's ever seen something like this,
Right.
right? Versus that this character that everybody's using, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
you already stand out.
Yeah. No, that's an awesome advice. Yeah, I think if I had done that as a student, I think that I'd be super excited to like animate a super cool character because I feel like there's so many times where you feel limited to like kind of like what you've already seen done with
Right,
that character, so you're kind of like repeating what you saw that was kind of cool. So it's just
right,
like a watered down version of the better version that you just saw online.
right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know that's
Yep.
interesting. Um, cool. So is there a reel that you say you wanted to like share or scrub
Oh
through?
yeah. I mean, so this was just I just had this playing in the background. This was my other reel from. So after I did my 4 years on Legends of Runeterra,
Uh huh.
I'm back on it now. So I've been on it for another year, so I'm at 5 years now. But this was everything I had made after 4 years on it. This was not everything. This was a small little smattering of stuff I had made.
Hmm.
But I wanted to it was such a unique experience because I was like, man, we did so many different things. Like I was able to do much more than just animating. Granted, a lot of what I put on here is animation focused, but
Right.
this just gave an idea of like what R&D can be like on a game.
Huh.
Here, I'm going to start it over at the beginning here. So I just say, yeah, these are mock-ups.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, we didn't know what the game was at first. Here's what we knew: we want to make a card game.
Hmm.
That was it. This was before Hearthstone came out,
Interesting.
so the world was very wide open. Um, and so, like, these first animations were, um, hey, what if the designers had some loose ideas of rules? What if you play a few cards and then like you play Teemo Poison Dart and Teemo Mushroom, and then it manifests as like this amazing cinematic, right?
That's cool.
So these were just like, here, let me do a test. I think this is like a week each, maybe.
Hmm.
just these first two with Darius here.
Mm-hmm.
You'll step through because there's some fun frames here. No, I didn't even get to spline these. I just did them all. It's just all stepped.
Yeah.
God, this is old. To be honest, these need to get on personal demo real soon because they're getting old. But
That's awesome.
so yeah, hopping back, and you can see here the different color cubes. So this is a good example of games. Even when you're doing your prototypes, I got to be thinking of different height characters.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I was like, well, if we go down this road, we'll have Timo size characters, we'll have humans, and then we'll have like, Volibear and big characters. And we'll have to make sure our models you have to fit in one of those three. So it's like you're already this is where games and film are a little different. Like I have to think systemically.
Gotcha.
So then and what that means is when I'm animating him, I'm making sure that his hits are could plausibly be so I'm hitting the green here because once you put effects on it, you buy that was hitting a little short character. So I have to make sure every hit feels like I could be hitting all three of these.
Right.
So there's an example where games are a little different. Film, yeah, you don't have to think about that. It's just got to hit the character, right? So, anyways, yeah. So these first few ideas were like, oh, this team one was fun. So he does this little air run. I wish I had had time to finish these.
Yeah.
And the bummer is these are gone. These files are lost to the
Oh, really? Oh, man.
I don't know where the files ended up.
Damn.
But this is also an example of R&D or prototype. Is you make something to a point that proves whether it works or not, and then you move on.
Gotcha.
You don't always get to finish it. And this is why, if you go look at my demo reel, it's mostly personal work. It's not a lot of professional work because most of my professional work is either unfinished because it proved or disproved what it needed to, and then we moved on. So it's not really good for a demo reel.
Sure.
Or I have a whole bunch of work that's still under NDA because one of the games I worked on is not released. So that's another tough part about games is like I had to wait 6 years to show this stuff. This is 6 years old.
Jeez.
I had to wait 6 years before anybody could see this stuff.
Wow.
So it can get a little tough to be like, wow, I've gone this long and nobody's gotten to see anything I've made.
Sure.
That's an extreme case. It's usually not that long.
Gotcha.
So yeah. So this was me, and then Adam Phillips did some cool stuff over top.
That's cool.
These were like little. What if characters just spawned from the heavens? We really didn't know. Like you play a card and then the character just like comes down from the sky. Right? That was sort of the idea. God, he did such cool effects.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, he really made these work. Funny, these animations, these two, I didn't put them on my demo reel because I was like, what's so cool about them is his effects, like not even the animation. So I was like, I can't justify putting them on a reel. This is all Adam Phillips. But again, this isn't really exciting from an animation perspective at all. There's nothing, but it's like, hey, how does it work when there's multiple characters? Like how do they scoot when you drop a character in between? It's like these are the kinds of things we had to think about.
Yeah. Are you comping all these together within Maya, or do you actually bring into like Unity and or After Effects or something?
Most of this was all Maya mockups.
Okay.
This
gotcha.
Is Maya. Yeah, these are all Maya with, and then I would give the render to Adam, and he would paint over.
I see. Cool.
So all the ones with Adam Phillips are just Maya renders, and he would paint over. So this is all in Maya.
Interesting.
Yeah, so even like me dragging this card.
Yeah.
All in Maya. I just make it look like a game.
Interesting. That's cool.
So let me see. I think I have another one that's like that. Yes, this is all in Maya.
Mm-hmm.
So this test was cool because we were like, hey, what if we have the characters on either side? And at the time we were getting excited about maybe they're miniatures, right?
Yeah.
And so I mocked up. I was like, hey, let's do it like Final Fantasy style, where you just swing your sword and a hit effect flashes on the bad guy.
Yeah.
And the designers were like, oh, I don't know, is that going to look weird? And I was like, what? Games have been doing this for 1,000 years. Of course it's not going to look weird, but you still got to make something to prove it, right?
Sure.
So this was me mocking something up, and Adam did some cool effects over top.
That's cool.
Just to, again, just to show this is kind of what and everybody was like, oh my gosh, this would be amazing.
Yeah.
And then we ended up not doing it. But yeah, same here. This was like, okay, well, let's go even further down the road of miniatures. Like they really are miniatures. And now again, these are my crummy little bases here that I built, but the idea was, what if these feel like Warhammer miniatures, right? They're really highly crafted. It feels like a tabletop game.
Yeah.
But then, you know, there's these cool effects over top. You know, maybe they come to life. This was me. This actually, I think this is in Unity. No, this was my Maya mock-up, but I ended up going and building this in Unity. I scripted the whole thing and built it so you could move this guy around in Unity. And
Oh, I see. Cool.
this little mock-up's in Maya. This one, this was just like, this was a really old rule set, but we were like, oh, what does it feel like to play a character, and how do the cards move? And
that's cool.
so, yeah, just trying different ideas. Again, it's not really animation exciting, but it's like game developer cool.
Yeah, for sure.
This is starting to get a little closer to like, now we're starting to get a little bit more like, this is a couple years down the road. We're starting to look like the actual game now, right?
Right.
And this is just an idea for a spell. That, again, I didn't actually ever get to animate it. It was just like a quick mock-up.
Gotcha.
I built all the weapons, and I was like, well, what if all these the poros popped out and they were all animated? Someday we'll do that, right? Because it's a cool idea. And then I left the team. So. And then this was, I didn't include wireframes or anything, but this was I modeled and rigged this character because I didn't like these poros.
Oh, I see.
I was like, I don't really like these, and their arms were very stubby. They weren't meant to hold things. They were, you know.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because this was the League model, and I was like, well, I want to redesign them. So this was, I never got to texture it, right?
Gotcha.
Everything's half done.
Sure.
But I actually have a better render. I don't know why I put up this crummy one. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, just little things like, now we're getting into like champ, like these are like very champ specific stuff, and even this stuff like
that's cool.
Did I put the UI up here? Oh, I don't have the one with the UI. No, okay. But you know, mocking up like some effects, and then this was some previs of like, we didn't know what the theme of the game was. We were playing with an idea of like, me and the art director were like, what if, you know, the game, like the meta narrative is like, there are these, what I liked is, I was like, if you go look at fantasy art, there's, all fantasy art has like a character looking up at some monolith, right? It's like a very cliche fantasy art thing to do.
Yeah.
And so we're talking, we were like, okay, let's play off that narrative, because obviously something about that resonates inside of people.
Sure.
So we were like, what if in our world of Runeterra, right? That's the world of League of Legends, Runeterra.
Right.
What if all around the world there are these like monoliths, and if you walk up to one somehow, we didn't know how, but you could connect with another person in Runeterra, and you play this game. You know,
yeah.
We ended up deciding that the card game didn't need that level of story.
Yeah.
But for a while we weren't. I mean, you just don't know though, right? Like, you just don't know when you're making. That's another thing that, like, when a game comes out and a movie, any piece of creative, as a viewer, you're like, well, yeah. I mean, that's, of course you made it that way. That's the way you'd make it.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you don't know when you're making it.
Sure. Yeah.
So this was us saying like, so this was a previs I made. So this is all out of Maya.
Interesting.
So I pull in a bunch of textures and stuff. So I'm like, what if this is the start sequence of the game where you come up, and this like, and it ices over, you know, and you pick like your deck, and you're connected with somebody else, and then your boards build. And,
that's awesome.
You know, like, we just had no idea. We were like, I don't know, maybe this is what it should be. And
that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how, like, I don't know. I love how, like, you like almost like just developing the game without the technical constraints of it, just pretending as if you are just making the game, just doing a mock-up like that. I think that's like really cool to see.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you have to do, where you're like, let me go build what I want it to be, and then I'll tell you what I need, you know, because then I've made it, so I'll tell you.
Yeah.
You know, and then the programmer will say, oh, well, we can't do that because of this technical constraint, and you'll go, well, we have to be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
So then you get into the hard part of game development, which is like, the creative part's fun, and you're like, I prove that this is cool. We all agree this is cool.
Yeah.
But if we want this, we got to clear all these technical obstacles, you know?
Right.
So but it's fun too when you get a team that's excited to clear those technical obstacles.
Gotcha. You know? Yeah. Do you ever, like, I don't know, like, do you ever have moments, like, in terms of like when you feel like satisfaction, or like when you feel I don't know, like for like feature animators, it's like, you know, seeing a movie out on screen. You know, when you see people's reaction. For you, do you feel the same like when you have worked so hard for like a game and then like you see how players like react to
Yeah.
something that you may have done, or you know, like do you ever get those moments pretty often in like your industry?
It's different because I think the moment I'll be honest, there's one moment that maybe someday I want. So this kind of goes back to an earlier question. Is there
Uh-huh.
something you would work on if you couldn't? I do. I guess I've had it one time in my career, but there is one moment that I would love, which is I would love to see something I made in a theater. Which, to be
Interesting.
fair, the short film I made to graduate, I did get to go see people watch it in a theater, so that
Gotcha,
was
gotcha.
cool. But that moment, I still want that moment.
I see, I
Um,
see.
because there's something so special about like everybody's in a theater, it's dark, everybody's attention is 100% focused, and then your shot comes up and maybe it makes everybody laugh or cry or whatever,
Sure.
and there's such like a connection there that's so cool.
Yeah.
Games are a little different because so much is working together at any given moment. It's very rare that you're animate like I animated that moment, and that moment was specifically the thing that everybody reacted to.
Sure.
It does happen, but it's tends to be kind of a combination of so many things coming together. Like for example, on something like Last of Us, um, there's so many layers to that animation system, right? Like
Sure.
some, it's just so layered. It's like they'll have an animation for the arm that does that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, and then they'll have 5 versions depending on what degree you pick something up at.
Right, right.
So it's like, and then you see somebody use it in game. I don't know. Do you really feel a sense of right? And
Yeah.
it's not really your animation. It's how the tech works with your animation, and all that comes together. So it's like, it's a lot less of like these specific like moments where you're like,
Sure.
oh, I did that and that's mine.
Yeah.
It tends to be more like an overarching satisfaction that like, hey, this feature, this big thing that we are doing, we got in and it resonates. It's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You are still proud of your moments, and I do think that's what's fun about getting to work on these level ups is they are little mini films. So
Yeah.
they are cool moments where the game stops for a second, it plays a little 5-second movie, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I animated that 5-second movie. So it is kind of like a free pass for
Gotcha,
those
gotcha.
moments.
Cool.
But yeah, you still have it. It's just more like kind of a feature, you
Gotcha,
know.
gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, so it's more of like a feeling good in terms of like having like a done like a group effort kind of thing.
Yes, very much so.
Gotcha. That's awesome.
Yeah. Here, but I know we have to leave here, but I want to answer.
Sure.
Did I work on Legends of Runeterra Cinematic? I didn't. I was off the team when they were working on that. Um, but I don't know that they did the whole thing internally. I think a lot of the animation was. I know I'm not supposed to talk about this stuff, but spoiler: we don't do every single thing in house. We outsource some things, and
Sure.
I think that it was a combination of people here and outsourcing.
Gotcha.
And then is everything based on Teemo's scale at Riot? No, but the scale in League of Legends is pretty goofy. I think it's based on one of the characters. It's like not Teemo, it's definitely it, but there is a character where they're like it's Teemo units, and you're like, what the heck's a Teemo unit?
Gotcha.
I know Teemo is arrangement. Yeah, well, Garen's joke can be funny or unfair. Yeah, there you go. All
Yeah.
right, that's
Cool. All right. So I think that was all the questions. So to close off, I don't know, last remarks in terms of like students who might be interested joining your class for the upcoming term, which the enrollment opens in December, the class starts in February. But yeah, any like last remarks that you want to say, kind of, I don't know, any last notes?
um, no, I mean, I would love. I'm excited to do this. I really love doing this kind of stuff. I love teaching. I love learning. I probably the best thing I can say is if action is exciting. If you find yourself whenever you're animating, be more excited about action and movement and momentum, um, then you might want to consider hopping in with me because that's the stuff that drives me. And you might be surprised. You might actually be a games animator and not know it.
Hmm.
So yeah,
That's cool. All right. All right. With that said, everyone, so feel free to check out the website. if you have questions, you can feel free to email us or just contact us on the through the website. But yeah, Sean will be available. Limited seating to 10 seats. But yeah, that said, have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.